We didn't start the fire, light it, but we tried to fight it. You're gonna have that in your head the rest of the day. That Billy Joel song, We Didn't Start the Fire, I learned it, every word, when I was young, and it's about, all the things in history. We didn't start the fire, but it's still going, and we are continuing it. We also didn't light this chalice. We lit this chalice. But the chalice has been burning for decades and has been handed to us. History can help us gather strength knowing our ancestors faced similar, seemingly insurmountable challenges. The flaming chalice symbol was created during World War II as a symbol to be used by the Unitarian Service Committee. The Unitarian Service Committee was an organization set up by the Unitarian Association. This was prior to the merger with the Universalists. It was set up to be a life-saving mission in Europe, but only one minister and his wife agreed to participate, Reverend Waitstill Sharp and his wife, Martha Sharp. So they left their children behind in the United States, and they went to Europe, to Prague, and they set up an office to help people escape from Nazi-occupied areas, including a lot of children. Martha set up some of the earliest kinder transports, which later other groups copied to bring children out of Nazi-occupied areas to the United States and England. And here's a picture of what that symbol that they created. They needed an official-looking symbol that they could put on paperwork, on documents, that the Nazis wouldn't recognize. It couldn't be a big cross. And so this is the symbol. They hired an artist. His name was Hans Deutsch, and he created this symbol. And the next slide is an image from the Unitarian Service Committee office where they are fitting a child with some clothes. He's going to be on one of those kinder transports, taken away from his family, but brought to safety. And you can see the symbol behind them of the Unitarian Service Committee. And this next picture is a bunch of people in the office trying to get signed up for various resources and support and safety. And you can see the chalice symbol on the package and on the signage at the top there. Now, why did Hans Deutsch create that symbol, the cup with the flame inside? We don't know. That's the answer. We don't know. There is some evidence, maybe from some writings, that he was inspired by the story of Jan Hus, who was a Catholic priest who lived 100 years prior to Martin Luther, prior to the Reformation. And Jan Hus began a bit of his own Reformation at that time by, among other things, offering the communion wine to the people during the Mass, which at that time was forbidden. Only the priest was to take the wine and give the host or the bread to the people. But Jan Hus believed that the sacrament was for everyone, and so he gave the wine, the chalice, the cup, to everyone. And for that, he was martyred. He was burned for his crime of widening the circle of God's love to everyone. So was the chalice of the Unitarian Service Committee logo Jan Hus's cup for all people, and the flame his flame of sacrifice? Maybe. I don't know. And honestly, I don't think Martha and Waitstill cared too much either. They were too busy trying to organize to rescue large numbers of people from a fascist government. So we can look to them, their willingness to do whatever was needed, to not get too caught up in the symbol or the words, to do what they needed to do to defy power in service to their values. And we can look to Jan Hus And we can look to another of our heretic ancestors, Michael Servetus, who in the 1500s challenged the Christian idea of the Trinity. He was one of the earliest recognizable Unitarians. Unitarian as in God being one part instead of three parts, the Trinitarian view. And he too was burned for his crime of religious expansion. And we are the inheritors of his faith. The faith of courage, the faith of expansion, the faith of love for all people, the faith of the Sharps, of the UUs who died in Selma, Alabama, fighting for racial justice and equal voting rights. We didn't light this chalice, but it has passed down for us to keep it alight, and it can guide the way for us into the future, dark as it may sometimes seem.
If you are content to stay in the foyer area, please do, but there are seats in the front row. It's nice to know what is truly eternal. We're going to start with a reading this morning. It's from the book of meditations called Noisy Stones by Unitarian minister Robert Walsh. This is called Fire at the Parsonage. The fire started about midnight Saturday in the little storage room that connects the kitchen to the garage. To look into that burning room was to glimpse another world. A surprising alternate universe. It had always been an ordinary room that I could walk in and out of or through to the other side without anything unusual happening. I was familiar with the contents of the room. I knew the texture and color of its surfaces. It had a certain smell and a certain sound. This time, when I opened the door, I saw flames and swirling smoke that moved toward me and past me and stung my eyes and burned the inside of my nose. The universe had been orderly. Now, flowing out of that room into the rest of the world was chaos. Things were out of control. Destructive forces were loose. The chief difference between the universe before and the universe after opening that door was in the dimension of time. I well know that all the things to which I am connected, loved ones, favored possessions, self, will be swept away in time. But the fire said now. It may happen now. The world is going to end, and we don't know when. My world or yours may end tomorrow in some unexpected way. Our shared world, Earth's biosphere, will end as well. Maybe 10 million years from now when the sun overheats, maybe next week in an accidental nuclear war. We may have no warning, no time to prepare. Have we done what we needed to do? Have we said the words we should say before the opportunity is gone? The walls are cool now. The charred and water-soaked things are piled outside. The urgency has been replaced by weariness and aggravation. I remember that for a while, I thought I knew exactly what was most important. But the fire said, now. It may happen now. Fire is such a tricky spiritual and religious symbol. It's the light in the dark, and it's a destructive force. It's the flame under the kettle making you a cup of tea when you are weary, and it's also burning our heretical ancestors at the stake. It's that burning passion for justice that somehow also burns you out past the point of functioning. It destroys the phoenix, but then it births it again. Today, the congregation is taking up the question of whether to call me into a ministry that has been growing between us for the last 2 years or so. Meanwhile, all around us, fires are burning. And maybe like you, or maybe you like me, maybe me like you, are having a hard time telling what kind of fires they are. Are they the fires of commitment igniting and reigniting in people of conscience, a willingness to do what is right at great personal cost? Are they the sinister fires that consumed our heretical ancestors? Are they just the chaotic result of a warming climate? That was, thank you, the 3 other nihilists in the room for laughing. That was good. And bless it all, there are some among us who are smelling smoke for the very first time, wondering, where could that be coming from? You're welcome. We'll get you some Kevlar gloves and show you how it's done. All around us, these fires are burning, and I am asking myself, have we done what we need to do? Have we said the words we should say? Have we done the deeds we should do before the opportunity is gone? Because the trickiest part about all of these fires, the ones we light each Sunday, the ones we sing about, the ones we ponder, and the ones we fear, is that it is the same chemical reactions. It's the same chemical process either way. Or think of it this way. The same sun that fuels our lives and the whole concept of life itself, right? The same sun that fuels that with its warmth and its light, photosynthesis for the plants, and then up and up through the chain, will someday grow so hot that life on Earth will not be possible, like millions and millions of years in the future. Sometimes when I wonder about the state of humanity, I Google different things like when is it gonna get so hot that we get to end this experiment of humanity? And then I'm like, oh, it's a really long time from now. I'm like, you know what, Villnave, there's a lot of baseball left. You got to get back out there. All right. My inner cheerleader is it's like Yogi Berra. But in Hindu cosmology and theology, the goddess Kali has the powers of both creation and destruction. Right? That they are not separate impulses. And that can be hard, right? For those of us who either inherited from our ancestors or just from the wider society a deeply Western mindset that there is a divine creator and a divine destroyer, and that they are separate and in fact antagonistic with one another, and that we do our business with the creation side of things. It can be hard to comprehend that there are cosmologies and theologies and worldviews where creation and destruction are not oppositional impulses, but deeply interconnected. Right? Creation and destruction are not separate impulses in the goddess Kali. They are forces of fiery possibility. They are forces that strip away all illusion. But like I said, when you have inherited or are swimming around in that sort of Western mindset, it can be hard to conceive that. So we're going to come into that concept through a different angle. There is a subset of humanity who have attended both births and deaths, other than your own or one you're actively participating in. Right? So, right, not the birthee or the birther or the person who's dying. Right? But there's a subset of us who have been at both births and deaths. It's often healthcare providers and clergy, but some of the rest of you as well. And as one of those people who has attended both birth and death, I can attest that in the space of the creation and destruction of life, there is no room for illusions about control. There is not space to be precious about our ideas or our ideals. Right? You cannot be precious about, like, well, I didn't think of myself as the sort of person who did blah-biddy-blah. Don't care. You are now. Right? I don't think I can. Too bad. Happening. I feel like the people who have given birth are like, yeah, been there. Right? Instead, that space where life is created and destroyed is one where we glimpse the things that make us human. How fragile, how tentative we really are, how impossible, how wondrous, how deeply we are connected and interconnected in a million tiny ways that defy language, how powerful we are, how we can do things that we never thought capable of. We can bring a human being into this world, and we can let go. We can say goodbye. As religious humanists, which many of us here, me included, are, we're not super spun up about whether there's a discernible deity present in the room. Some of us think yes, some of us think no, most of us shrug, but that's not the point. What we care about is about the lives that spin in and out of existence. And we insist that just by being part of this cycle of birth and death, you carry an imprint of the great mysteries of this universe. And so in this moment, where we have opened the door and seen the fire, where the fire has said that the moment of destruction might well and truly be now, where we are hungry for certainty, but we know deep down that control is an illusion, where we aren't really sure if we are attending the death of something troubled but familiar, or if we are attending the birth of something wild and unknown but possible and beautiful. This moment where we have opened the door and seen the fire, what is required of us? Here's a few things. One is that we must remember what matters most. That, right, when the aggravation and the weariness start to set in, right, how many of you have, in the days since the election, right, has aggravation and weariness started to take the place of your clear sense of urgency about what was most important? And here's what I'll say, what is most important to me is people. In these days, people matter way more to me than ideas. Remember what I said about how there's not room in the space of creation and destruction of life? There's not room to sort of get precious about, like, this is my idea of how things ought to get done. This is my idea about how democracy ought to work. This is my idea about how we ought to do change. Right? There's not going to be a lot of space for us to get precious about those ideas in the coming years. And given the choice between taking an action that preserves an institution that represents an idea about community and taking an action to save the lives of people in our community, I think you know. I'm going to pick the action that saves the lives of people in our community every time. We have to be clear about what matters. The second thing that is required of us is that we have to remember that we have inherited both a cup and a flame. We have inherited both a container, a community, and a fiery spirit of possibility. And sometimes we choose one over the other. We choose to maintain the structure, maintain the community, maintain the institution, and ignore the spirit. And sometimes we choose the spirit and let it run rampant without any sense of accountability or groundedness. We need both. And finally, what is required of us is a willingness to acknowledge that we're not going to know whether we are attending the birth of something new and possible or the death of something familiar but awful. Because the truth is that we are attending both at the same time. And there are pine cones, little tightly closed ceratinous pine cones up on our branches that have been there 15 or 20 years even, just hanging out. And we like the way they look, exactly where they are. Don't move my pine cone. But the fire is here. It's now. It's coming, and we cannot fully stop it. And so some of our work is to figure out how to let the tree as we know it now go. Let the pine cones open. Let them drop their seed. Let new life form in the rich, fire-scarred soil that will remain. Right? We cannot stop the fire, but we can use it. We can use it to kindle the chalice, to ignite our hearts for justice, and to open us to the new world that is waiting to be born out of the ashes of the old one. I wish I could tell you this will be an easy and pleasant experience, but it might not be. Anybody who's attended a birth or a death could tell you. Easy and pleasant, they are not. But necessary, deeply human, and filled with possibility you could not have imagined. Yes, that too. May we be the people of the cup and the flame, the community and the spirit, all bound up together. May it be so. Amen.